subscribers, Zushi fans. Today we're going to be talking about OSINT and footprinting for security professionals. If you think about the internet and all the services and information out there, it creates a wealth of opportunities to learn about a target without even raising any interest into your actions. Does the target own a mail server? What about a web presence? Do they do any social media? Do they have LinkedIn? What about Facebook? Domain names. Do they have multiple domain names that they're hosting? And are they in the search engines? Google, Bing, Yahoo. Are they in the archives? Shodan. Who owns those domains? What common systems are they using with those domains? What about the employees? Are they in those social media sites? Are they founders? Are they engineers? Do they have any posts listed in the forums, LinkedIn, job postings? This can all help you understand your target. And just for a definition, OSINT is shared publicly available data that can be collected and shared without breaking any laws. It doesn't require a warrant, nor is it considered a shady, gray, or blackout process. I'm not a lawyer, but don't trust me. Go ask your own lawyer in your own country, your region, or municipality. And the target today will be the New York Times. As you can see, just starting at Google, we already have a couple websites we can start focusing on. NewYorkTimes.com appears to be the biggest one, so we'll go ahead there. When looking at websites, it's always good to see if the links generate any type of information as far as URL encoding or file types. In this case, it seems to be primarily HTML, so they're probably overloading any kind of custom actions that are happening. Look at what's available. Are there authors? Is there any information that we can gather from this? But most likely you're going to end up scrolling to the bottom, which on the New York Times site takes a while because they got a lot of articles and a lot of content. And when you can finally find the bottom, you're going to see a whole bunch of information. So what in here looks interesting? We're not looking at them for the news. We're not looking at them for opinion pieces unless our particular thing was about an editorial or about a content. Arts, living, more. There's a store. That's interesting. So we could add store.newyorktimes.com to our actual domain site. So we have nytimes.com, www.nytimes.com and store. There's also myaccount.nytimes.com, nytlicensing.com, corporate subscriptions, email newsletters. But if you look all the way in the bottom, we have, help pages. But look at this, nytcode.com. Contact us. Work with us. The T-Brand Studio. And the thing that's interesting, if you look, all the corporate parts of New York Times seem to go to this. Let's go over to careers. Advertise careers. nytcode.com. So let's just go on there. What do we have? We can start to figure out a lot about a company based off their careers. We're definitely interested in their technology. So what's in here? Notice we've now expanded our scope from NewYorkTimes.com to nytcode.com. But, we've got people. That's always a positive. And if you look at the URL, there's an actual nytcode.com/person/name. Is there old individuals that we could look up there? Is there new individuals that we could look up there? Is that for every individual? But, you know, no matter what, I mean, a lead software engineer, Omaha, Nebraska, what he does. He operates his own weather station. Got some personal information about him. But, you know, we keep finding other names. So don't give up the value of a person on a website. Once we know how they structure their usernames, their passwords, because most corporations use username and passwords, you know, structure. So it could be jeff.sasson.fediges.nytco.com or newyorktimes.com, but it could be j.sasson, could be jeff.sasson. Maybe he's a executive and he just gets Jeff at. But we can figure out a lot based off the information that's given on an actual corporate website. And then, like I said, he's linked off to his personal website. Some weather station, Big Boy Weather. Is there anything interesting we can pull off this that we might be able to use to pivot back to the New York Times based off of this? Well, obviously we have high temperature, low temperature. You know, we got camera images, and so we can figure out, you know, approximate location. You know, this feels like it's pretty damning of where this camera is set up, and if he's maintaining this out of his personal residence, we now know we could figure out about where he is. This is all interesting information that we could use to find him. I mean, he says he's Queens, New York, but this camera photo, if it's somewhere near him, yeah, okay, Queens, New York, but we could figure out where this tree is, where these buildings are in relationship to these two. We can triangulate a fairly accurate neighborhood, if not more, where he is at. But we're not about, you know, looking for people. We're looking for information on this company. And, you know, each individual here has something that, you know, again, once we know the username and password, you know, requirements, is her username s.ali? Is it sobia.ali? Is it just Sobia? We know her favorite movie, her favorite book. Those are things that we can feed into password, you know, tools to figure out what we want to know. Head of standalone products. These are all things we can look into. And as you can see, there are a ton of people. As we click on one, we get another. And we should be taking all these names and putting them in our database. And maybe they've hardened these names, maybe they haven't, but they should definitely be a part of our database. And they should also lead into what they're interested in, what they're looking for, and so forth for, you know, actual recon of the website. So besides that, what else can we find on this? You know, we've obviously moved off the main website and we've ended up on something called nytco.com. You know, my spidey sense is tingling. I'm thinking nytco.com is their corporate website, and, you know, we have people, diversity, social responsibility, careers. What about contact? What do we have in there? All right, so we got booking at nyttimes.com. So maybe all the email addresses are nyttimes.com, but maybe the nytco.com is the domain for everything else. Here's an interesting one: social media. So now we're starting to find social media accounts at nytimespr, at nytcare. Okay, so let's go to that Twitter page. We start to see more and more info, like NYT Metro is apparently something. We can slowly NYT times PR. We can start to see a little bit, and one thing that happens is we'll start to see people respond. Like looking through this, NYT's PR. There's an NY times. We can start to map the relationships between the company social media accounts and what they're doing. Now, we only have 2 here, but in later episodes we'll show you how to take all those names we took from the other ones and start feeding them into other tools to find out what's going on. So once you've done your basic website reconnaissance via browsing the website, looking at the links you can find on your own, and trying to gather as much evidence or information as possible, the next step is actually to start to use search engines like Google or Shodan or such to actually start finding more information that you weren't able to find just by browsing the website. These are commonly called Google Dorks, and there's a couple links I'll put in the description as to a couple examples of Google Dorks, and at the end of this I'll show you some of the more recent ones. But in this case, we're looking for all the websites that have in the URL, the New York Times, and obviously we're getting, New York Times' websites ranked number 1. We're getting links to websites, but there's also a developer.ny times. That might be worth looking at. There's an rss.ny times. What are they using for their RSS feed? And, help.ny times. Apparently they have a vulnerability disclosure policy. Is there any information we can glean from there? You'll notice in this case I'm using NURL, and that allows us to find all the websites that have it in the URL of NY Times. So we're finding things like, NY Times books, things that are related to the URL but not necessarily tied to it also. Where the power actually comes in, though, is when you start mixing and looking for actual exposed information. So if we look at this example, we have, in title, index of, which is saying that we're looking for any open directories that are providing indexes of what's in there. And we chose 2 actual fairly secure files that are normally not available, the SSH host RSA key and the SSH host RSA key pub, and we searched for those, and the first hit, we have someone's SSH config for the server. Website is exposing its Etsy SSH configs, which allows us to get their private keys, their public keys, their SSHD config, figure out what modules they've enabled. And let's see here. Here's another one that has enabled their Etsy SSH config. Yeah, another Etsy SSH. Now, some of these are old files, but like 2018 is fairly modern. This is probably still relevant information that we can use today. If you're picking a target, you would want to add the in URL or in site or something that would reference exactly who your target is, or you're not looking in random locations. So we're finding, again, feel free though, just because you got something, click around. Now we're on someone's Etsy of their website. Okay, this website's a cPanel site, or at least it has cPanel configs at one point. We can go into the cron settings, see what crons are running. We can probably go to cPanel backups and actually download the backups information from there. How far can we go? Oh, we can go all the way to the root. What else can we find in here? Is there any information available in the home directory? I don't know what this is, but I'm in the home directory and I see a bunch of usernames with WordPress.txt. I'm gonna bite. What does mama WordPress txt say? Oh, look. Not only did we used the actual Google Dork to find something that was misconfigured, but more importantly, we browsed from there. We researched from there. We got interested and we kept going around. And now we ended up at, we found a DB name, Mama. They probably thought that was secure. Mama pass 123, probably thought that was secure. We have the auth keys. We have pretty much everything we need now to get into this WordPress site. Speaking of WordPress, the next one's specifically targeting WordPress. And this is, if in the URL we see WP content uploads data.txt. Looking at this, I see a lot of admin 123456. I see admin 999. This one I feel much more likely that it's still there and is popular. Admin QWERTY. So you can see, just looking for files that we know might contain it and then finding misconfigured web service allows us to expose a lot of information. In this case, we're looking for anything that says in the title index of. So again, same as before, we're looking for open open indexes of websites that maybe contain the word /SQL. I don't know what nutbutternutititious is, but database.sql and phpmin SQL dump. So apparently we got a VES FAS only SQL dump of their database. And I'm sure if we went through this, we would find more and more high-level information that we probably don't want on the public internet. What else are we going to find with the index of SQL 1? It looks like this one's been pretty well locked down, but there's still a few things. So, not sure what this is. Being that it's Apache.org, I'm assuming these are just generic. So let's go to the next one. What about new technologies? What about SQLite? I picked on this one earlier already, but we looked for, again, file directories that had their indexing on that had the default SQLite database. And one thing of interest is, yes, we have the SQLite database right here, but we also have, my site, settings.py. Again, we got in here by finding a misconfigured site, but what do we find when we're in there? Well, we find their secret key, which specifically says, keep this key secret. It's a Django website. Let's keep going down. This user had, because now it's on the internet, a fairly secure database name, username, and password. But a misconfiguration has now made it public. So it's no longer secure here. And even though we didn't end up on this site from the way that we searched, we found the misconfiguration, got here, and found that. Another popular use is finding login pages. Now, this is a recent one because there's recent issues with this router, but in-text landcom, in title router-login, and what do we find? We find, well, this one looks promising. It's an IP address only, and wrong button. Happens to all of us. We're finding this is someone's router on their home or office IP address. Now I'm not going to accept the risk and continue, but if I was actually scanning this network and I found this, or if I was scanning this customer and I found a link to this, then I would definitely be going here because now I found a login page for their router exposed in the public internet. Again, the query is not hard. It's what do we expect in the title? What do we expect in the text? And here's a whole bunch of them. So when someone announces a public exploit for router brand A version XYZ, you can just come in here and search for that router version and then find those exploits on the actual public internet. Then you know all these places where you can go and take control of someone's router and, you know, maybe you start routing traffic through it. What if you're looking at users of a site that you're trying to, you know, penetration test? You can now use that to come across from that user site. You know, same thing. I'm not going to keep going over it, but, you know, looking for OAuth private keys. These are highly, you know, you don't want these exposed because this will allow someone to, you know, skip over your OAuth authentication if you don't have it properly tied down. An interesting one, and one that we're seeing more often now, is vulnerability reports. A lot of companies have requirements that they need to have penetration tests or open vulnerability scanning and so forth. And, you know, they need to share these with either vendors, customers, and they're ending up on the internet in ways that probably shouldn't be. Just have no clue who this is, just going to randomly pick on it, hope, and look at that. So now we're finding out that at this URL, now this is less useful for us because we don't know what that IP address is or who it is or so forth. But if it was tied to the user we were actually looking for, then now we have a list of, well, they had 3 instances scanned and they hide vulnerabilities. Look, an RFI. What could you want other than an RFI on a customer site? The ability to include or upload a file and potentially execute it. You know, cross-site scripting. You now know what to target on that site just because they accidentally or didn't realize it was a bad idea, published their, you know, security scan. Now, here's a big one. Is it real? Let's see. So, it's a Heroku app. SQL injection might be possible on one of them. I don't know how tight this is. I mean, being that it's .ro but yeah, I mean, and right now we're looking at Zap scanning because Zap scanning is popular right now, but you can change this to Nessus, you can change this to anything you want, you know, and there's even Google dorks out there that will have all of the vulnerability reports. So you run that Google dork, change it to a company you're looking for, which we're not actively doing right now because we don't want to expose everyone's garbage at once, but you change, you know, it to the company you're looking for, and, you know, if they publish their vulnerability report either via requirement from a customer or compliance or whatever, and they just didn't realize what they're doing, you now know where to start banging on the doors a little bit harder. Similarly, you know, again, we're looking for index of, and we're looking for configs. We're looking for anything in there that we can find. Look, configs.zip, global.cfg, hijack. I don't even know what these are. I'm not going to click them, but you're starting to get the picture. You know, on some of these sites might just be rabbit holes that are sitting here to, you know, draw you in and let you start, you know, going down it. But if you're targeting your attack on the actual customer you're looking for, then, you know, finding an open config directory can be damaging. This one's always popular. It surprises people, but I mean, if you look at the dates, we're not seeing much recently because people have learned on this, but, you know, PHP might have been SQL dumps. But, I mean, we can go in and say, all right, past year. See, this has been pretty much locked down. Most of them, the second they hit the internet, there's white hats out there that are finding these and locking them down. But I mean, let's look at any time, and you can see that how damaging this could be. 2016. Let's just scroll down here. Let's see here. 2018. That's not that old. 2018, we got the PHP MyAdmin version. We got the local. We got the where it was run. We got the character set. Looks like it's WordPress. We scroll down, and one of the things you can do with these that's actually interesting is that maybe you don't care if this is actually valid anymore. Maybe it's not, and you're okay with that. But you know what we got? We got an email address. We got a username, password. We got a phone number. We got a where. These are things that can build your database to actually figure out what you're going to do. Keep going down, these are settings and configs and links and so forth, but, Roger Johnston. We've got links to his home site. His blog description, where it was from. Requires a password. Well, that's good. What if we search for password? Are we going to find anything of interest in here if we search for the word password? Password, yes. Password reset link. Post passwords, so if he had locked a post to a post password. So now we're in the actual post, but these could be private posts. These could be things that aren't enabled for other people. And we're getting that information just by scrolling through here. And again, just a ton of information that, for building word lists even, for what to hack against. PHP MyAdmin, server databases. Let's see if, again, this is an older one that may, well, I'm not gonna click that today, just in case. Which I imagine most of these, if they're over HTTPS, are gonna have the same problem. But if you're going to someone's site and it's tied to an IP or a website that is with the customer, then go in there, see what you can find in there. Now, I mentioned towards the end I would start giving you an idea of where I found a lot of these. Most of these were recently discovered ones and were published to the exploit database. And if you don't have this on site yet, exploit-db.com, and they have a link to Google Hacking Database, and as vulnerabilities or information or disclosures are found, they post them there. Let's just go to page 5. We'll look in here. Let's see here, site.gov.co index of. So that's going to be juicy info. You can see here what the different things are. This one is directly tied to an advisory and vulnerability, which means that there's probably an active exploit for this, and gives you as much information as possible and the ability to find it just by clicking a link. Again, if you're interested in this type of information gathering, then Google dork. It's a common search term. SANS has a thing. There are a ton of GitHub things, explanations on how it works, operators. There will be large, a 2020 cheat sheet. Most of these are, and you can use these for accessing, and doing further research on the sites that you've been paid for or contracted to look into. So the final thing I want to talk about with open source intelligence, especially in passive gathering, is the OSINT framework. You can reach us by going to osintframework.com. It should be a link also in your Kali site, but as you can see, OSINT is, and footprinting is a very large and expansive subject, and depending upon your target, it has more options that we can cover in one video. But this is a great framework. I would not use this as a checklist. Like, do not sit here and think that the best way to enter a pen test agreement is to start at usernames and go all the way down to training, but highlight the ones that are actually useful to you. And just to give you an idea of like the type of stuff you can find in this, let's say we were harvesting email addresses or looking for usernames, or we're trying to do a phishing campaign. We can come on over here to email addresses, common email forms, email verification, email search. All right, so we have a thing. We want to look for a company. So let's go to email search. One of the tools I like to use is actually theHArvester. The T means that it's actually a tool that must be installed and run locally. But if we click on it, it takes us to information about it, where we can get it, what it can do. So here we have the Harvester set up, ready to go, and we're going to scan apple.com, and we're going to scan basically everything this tool can do. We kick it off, and we can see, it starts scanning for apple.com on all these sites. Now, this will take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here for a minute, and, well, it's probably going to be more like 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll look at what it found for apple.com. All right, so after a undisclosed amount of time, at least one YouTube video later of watching, random stuff, we've come back and the Harvester has finished running on apple.com. And one thing to note and not to be concerned about is you can get API keys for all of these other services. And if you're doing this professionally, there's probably ones that you want to get. But, obviously I don't have them. And there's still a crap ton of results that you can get. There are, if I had to guess, this is probably solar.omniscient. They're probably blocking me because I don't have an API key. But at the end of the day, we get through all the exceptions. We get through all the search results we found for apple.com, referenced in their URLs and on their websites and in their LinkedIns and everything else. 26,198 IPs. Now, if you're doing a pen test engagement, you do not have permission to hit these 26,000. You have to sit within the IPs that they've found. If you're doing an open source discovery or, information gathering session on a company, then these would be the IPs you returned where you found their name was attached to them in some way, shape, or form. And we're just going to scroll through a lot of these. Makes me wonder if they own this 17 block, but we'll keep going through the IPs. As you see, we found a lot. And we get into domain names somewhere here. So now we have host found. So, 006.ts.apple.com. No clue what that is. One courier push.apple.com. Probably a push something. Their sandbox. 10 courier. 12, 13. Apple bot with a bunch of IP addresses. Let's keep going down. Phobos. Wait. Thought we saw something that looked interesting. Akamai. Agreements. Albert. Lots of Alberts. Alice's. These mean something to someone. They don't necessarily to me, but iTunes.connect. So depending upon your pen test scope, you may find additional things to test in here that you want to add to the scope. If you're just being asked to run a discovery on everything you can find about a company, you may find a lot of stuff that, the person who asks you to find it, Apple's a big company, but maybe they're not aware that there's something called smoot. Well, assuming by how many smoots there is, just like artist.apple.com. I'm sure they're aware of, but there's probably something in here that they're not aware of that may not be getting the attention that it should be getting for security. And that's usually where you'll find your highest value targets. The development or QA, continuous integration or CDE or SonarQube or GitHub accounts that has all the newest and latest stuff, and the barriers are done so you can do fast and agile programming, but someone cut corners and username and passwords are still set to default, and somewhere in here you're going to find those. And I'm just going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Apple's. Now, this is a ton of information we found. And this all started with the conversation of OSINT framework. Figure out what you're looking for, click on it, and then find the tools you want. Social networks, LinkedIn, if you're looking for, LinkedIn intelligence, scraped in, InSpy, if you're looking for, say, software developers or SREs or engineers in a company, start with social networks, LinkedIn, figure out which ones they are. Now you got their names, go to their email addresses, go to their usernames. You can use this to build the framework of what you're trying to find. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to smash that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed what you saw today. And hopefully more videos will be coming in the near future.